Welcome to Startup Hacks, a WE Global podcast. We explore the stories and secret strategies that women entrepreneurs use to save time and money when bootstrapping and building their businesses. I'm your host, Fernanda Carapina. Thank you, and welcome back to Startup Hacks. Today, our special guest is Lucía Gallardo, who's a Honduran serial entrepreneur who bridges technology with justice and inclusion. She is the founder of Emerge, a socio-technology solutions development lab offering impact as a service for companies and governments looking to address pressing industry and global problems. Lucía also co-founded Tabik, a community for nascent entrepreneurs in Latin America, and Dona un Libro, an award-winning educational foundation. Welcome, Lucía.
Thank you so much for having me, Fernanda. I'm super excited to talk about how to hack the startup experience.
Well, we can't wait to hear everything you have to share because I know that you do have a lot of experience in this area. I was wondering, just before we get started, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little background about your work experience, where you're from, and giving people a little bit of a context about your upbringing.
Sure. So I was born and raised, as you mentioned, in Honduras, and very much into the humanitarian and justice aspects of my life since early on. I like to say that Emerge was actually founded when I was 8 because I had a lot of formative experiences with a natural disaster that occurred in Honduras, and my parents being, in charge of a lot of the donations that were being distributed, they used to bring us along. And so I was very passionate from that moment on understanding, cyclical poverty and why some people had certain things and access to certain things and others didn't. So it was definitely, it's a big part of my journey to have been born and raised in Honduras. But I did spend quite a bit of time in Canada as well, where I worked in the public sector for some time, focused on international trade and undocumented immigration, and then transitioned into the tech space through artificial intelligence, neurotech, and then spent some time working in early stage investment. So definitely a non-linear path towards becoming a founder, but I fell deeply in love with startup culture and exponential technology, and this is now my Emerge is my second venture, but my first for-profit venture, and so it's been a wild ride and trying to figure out how to bootstrap your way into being a serial founder.
Yes, not so easy sometimes. I know that you didn't mention this, but you also went to MIT and got a lot of attention there and had quite a bit of success.
Yeah, I was named, one of MIT's Innovators Under 35 this past year, and so that's been a really great experience. They selected, really incredible entrepreneurs, and it's been really a joy to get to know some of them and their projects, and it did give the company quite a boost in terms of visibility, and just it felt good to know that our work was being, validated by experts from around the world, and that the approach was refreshing and innovative and considered to be forward thinking. So something I'm definitely proud of, but also blush when bringing up.
Well, you shouldn't, because you really should be very proud of yourself, and we need to pat ourselves on the back because these journeys are not always easy, and it's important we take stock on all of the great things that we finally do accomplish after putting in all that time. So let's talk a little bit about Emerge, and I wanted to encourage you, especially for our listeners, because it's not a very common term, if you wouldn't mind explaining a little bit about exponential tech and what that means.
Sure. So I think the easiest way to define it is technology that you implement that ultimately gets cheaper, more accessible, and just better results, yields better results over time. And so the more you sort of play around with it, the bigger the impact the technology can have on your efficiency. And so I think, artificial intelligence falls under that category. The more data it has, the better insights it can render. Blockchain falls under that category because the more data you have, the better the system can trace it and you can automate certain functions. So it's all these technologies that sort of, as you use them, they just give you better and better results, and they also become cheaper to continue to use.
And would that include cryptocurrency as well?
Yeah, yes, it does. it's all about leveraging these economies of scale. And once an exponential technology is used past a certain point where there's enough adoption and you have open sourced some of the technology, or you have more developers working on it, it just becomes a lot easier to manage, and the results are ultimately better. And so crypto does fall under that category, and the more that we see people start using it, obviously the more utility and opportunity to use that money we'll see, right? If merchants start accepting it, if you can send money to your friends easily, and they'll accept it. So all of these are benefits that come with adoption over time.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so let's talk about Emerge, because I think the work that you've been doing in different parts of the world with your company is really amazing, and the impact that you've had. If you could walk us through a little bit about why you started the company, which you touched upon, but also some of the projects that you're working on right now that you're excited about.
Yeah, so I think the company is very much a reflection of, initially my lived experience, and then followed on with like our key, early team members. Really, it started because of this like incessant thought about, technological justice that I had. I was, early on in 2016, 17, I was working in artificial intelligence. I was working with neurotechnology. I was into blockchain, but I was seeing all of this sort of be directed at consumer convenience and for markets of people that were, highly connected already. And it was just a matter of improving their lives. Whereas, from where I came from, and the things that mattered to me deeply were, problems that were really complex, and that, could we get them right, we could influence and connect parts of the world that are usually the last, if ever, to benefit from these kinds of technological innovations. And so I was really obsessed and determined to figure out how we could take exponential technologies and really democratize the impact of them, make them accessible for, a small, farming cooperative, just the way that agricultural companies are now benefiting from blockchain, or taking artificial intelligence and helping, a couple of marketplaces through to make better decisions and recommendations for their customers. So how could we really achieve that? And that was the initial spirit that sort of underpinned Emerge Technological Justice, and we have grown to become almost like a consultancy 3.0, because we bridge this notion of problem solving, an industry approach, yes, but then we marry that with a lot around inclusion and finding new markets that really are untapped, undiscovered, and creating, this industry approach to public good. And that we've, in that frame, we've worked on projects that relate to digital identification for displaced persons and connecting them to different services around the world. We've worked on, projects that bring in and connect rural farmers in parts of Africa to a blockchain and help them create their first-time records of sales, so that when they go ask for a micro loan, they don't get told that they're too high a risk, because now they can prove, they have documents that show that they're actually selling, producing, yielding, and so they get de-risked and the terms are much better on those loans. And so right now, for example, we're in the middle of what will be the largest pilot in a blockchain-based supply chain to date, which is working with 14,000 farmers across a certain part of Africa, and we're super excited about seeing how they interact, via text message with our platform, and that's been really exciting. So we've worked on some cool projects for sure.
Wow, that's so impressive. And do you have to travel to all these locations? I mean, obviously during COVID, I'm sure you're staying put, but generally.
Yeah, so I live completely nomadically. I don't have an apartment anywhere since 2018. I live out of one suitcase, one carry-on, and one purse.
Wow.
So that's been fun too, as I've had to bootstrap my wardrobe to a certain extent. And yeah, it's been really fascinating to get to see the world in these ways, because I temporarily live there. It's not like I'm coming to visit and it's a touristic experience. It's, I'm sometimes in shelters, or I'm in, conference hotels. So it could go from, a nice luxurious hotel to a shelter in the span of a couple of days. And in 2019, I was in 8 different places, like 8 different time zones within like 2.5 weeks or something like that. So it's very, it can be very draining, but ultimately it leads to us having a real thorough understanding of, how tech can be implemented, how it can be adopted, what that behavioral change is to actually help a population use and benefit from a product and not just be, death by platform and build something that no one ever uses or benefits from.
Wow. Well, that's incredibly impressive. I hope that and I know that you will continue to build your company and achieve great success. So let's shift gears for a moment and talk a little bit about the bootstrapping side of things. All entrepreneurs share the desire and the need to save time and money and maintain an edge, as you know all too well. And there are a lot of textbooks out there on business management, but building a company from scratch is often like riding a bull. It's hard to predict, requires a lot of stamina, and everyone has different techniques on how to stay on top. What would you say are some of your strategies, techniques, resources, and even kind of, your secret sauce that you found works for you and your work?
Yeah, I think for me, the first lesson that I think I had to learn the hard way, but I've really taken in and it's powered me quite significantly recently, is this notion that as a founder, what you really need to learn how to manage is your energy and your time. You need to eat for energy, you need to work out for energy, you need to make sure that you are constantly feeding this component of you that will have enough in order to yield good results. Because ultimately, a lot of bootstrap founders find themselves needing to take on so many different roles. Like you are your marketing department, you are your operations department, you are your product department. And so it's understanding how to manage my energy and know, when I've sort of taken on some habits that might impact that has been really impactful. And then on top of that is understanding how to manage your time and what you actually do need to spend time in. I think there's a lot of textbooks that do say, you need to do things a certain way. There's a lot of intentionality around fundraising and how essentially startups their perceived value is tethered to how much money they're able to raise, and that's something that we really need to de-incentivize to a certain extent, to a large extent. And so I think managing energy and time has been really helpful as a bootstrap founder, because it teaches you how to be really resourceful with your time, really resourceful with your effort. And that's the philosophy that you need to approach building a startup with, is resourcefulness and how to build a lot with very little. And there are so many, products nowadays that can really help people do that. There's a whole no-code movement where you can, build an app on something like Glide Apps and there's no coding involved. So you as a non-technical founder can even get, a minimum viable product or a proof of concept out there in in a month or something. There's Canva, which I absolutely love, which, it takes away all of the thinking about branding and about your social media and it looking professional and good. And so, there's automation tools where you can, automate your scheduling and have a virtual intelligent assistant doing your scheduling, which I use, and doing the same for your social media posts and scheduling those so that they go on release on a regular moment every day. So I think that there's a lot out there for people to leverage. It's just a matter of understanding how valuable your time is, how to manage it, what to spend time on, and what can be automated or outsourced to one of these tools.
Well, that was a lot.
Sorry. I am a lot. Okay.
No, you're a lot of amazing energy. That's why you've been so successful. So let's unpack that a little bit so that I think our listeners can really digest that all. Let's start with the concept that you raised, which is a really good one, which is the energy and time and maximizing both, and to really fuel that internal, source of energy that you have that you really need to draw upon in order to accomplish everything that you want. So what would be some practical Lucía strategies that you use on a daily basis? Let's say, I'm sure every week you're pretty busy. So what's a calendar strategy, other than you obviously would have a virtual assistant to calendar your work, but how do you organize it and execute on it?
Yeah, I think, we do have a tendency to try to say yes to everything. So the first thing I had to strip away was this notion that it's okay to say no. And so, if you can set your own estimate of where you're, depending on where you're at, of saying, I'm going to say no to 25% of things that come through. And, I evaluate that by, how much effort is it going to take to do and how much impact is it going to have? If I